The big debate in the fiscal cliff is this: should we be raising taxes on the wealthy as the president wants? And he defines that as $250,000 a year or more. Some people said that's too low, make it $1 million. Some people say raise taxes on everybody. Let's talk about it with David Callahan, co-founder and senior fellow at DeMoss, and Dan Mitchell, senior fellow at the Cato Institute. All right, David, first to you. Why do you think we should raise taxes on every American?
Well, Brian, if you remember, that Bush tax cut when it was first enacted in 2001 was meant to be temporary, and it was enacted at a time when we thought we had budget surpluses, which turned out to be overstated. And even looking back retroactively, it wasn't affordable at the time, which is why we ended up racking up a huge amount of debt under George Bush's presidency. And it's certainly not affordable now, those Bush tax cuts. And the problem is, if you only get rid of the tax cuts for the rich, it doesn't raise that much revenue. The big money is in those middle-class tax cuts, and that's why I think, unfortunately, we have to get rid of all of them eventually. Maybe not on January 1st, but certainly in the near future.
Yeah, you know what? Listen, I don't like the tax hike either, and we'll get to Dan in a second, but David, you're right, and it bears repeating. We've said it on this show many times. The president's tax plan is about 6 to 8 days of government operating income. That's it. It's not going to do anything, really. So, right. Dan, that aside, you think, bad idea, don't raise taxes on anybody.
Well, actually, I agree with David in the sense that if you don't do anything to control this ever-growing government, which expanded under Bush, now it's continuing to expand under Obama, then yes, sooner or later you're going to have to grab the middle class by the throat and choke them because there aren't enough rich people to finance big bloated government. And that's why, I'm standing in London. The reason that they have these big value-added taxes and very high social insurance taxes is the only way you can finance a welfare state is by squeezing the middle class. Now, that's going to be bad for the economy, bad for those taxpayers, just like taxing the rich is bad for the economy.
So you think, Dan, you think the answer is 100% cut spending? Even though the roads are a billion years old, light poles are falling over if you blow on them, right? And no airline can ever leave any airport on time.
Hey, those are functions of the state and local governments. One of the reasons we're so screwed up in this country, you see it in New Jersey and New York. Everyone waits for the federal government to do things, and the federal government is probably the most incompetent institution on the face of the planet. But here's what your viewers need to understand. In order to balance the budget in 10 years, all we have to do is limit the growth of spending to 2.5% a year. I want to cut spending, but we don't need to do that. Just constrain the growth of government.
Okay, I hear you. I hear you, Dan. And a lot of people would agree with you. David, would you go along with that? Because what Dan is saying, let's be realistic, 60% of the budget, right? Entitlement, Medicare. Are you willing to say to 85-year-olds, sorry, no more Medicare?
Well, ultimately, there has to be a combination of both tax increases and spending cuts.
And where do we cut, David?
Spending limits. And I think everybody agrees that the big money is in healthcare expenditures. You gotta, start to bend that healthcare curve. Otherwise, it's impossible to get a handle on these deficits. But look, the grand bargain that was on the table looked for $4 trillion in deficit reduction. The Simpson Bowles asked for $4 trillion. Just getting rid of those Bush tax cuts altogether gets you that $4 trillion without cutting a single cent of spending. And then if you added on top of that, controlling healthcare costs and going after some other unnecessary areas of spending, such as Pentagon spending, you'd really make a dent in the deficit. But you don't do it without serious revenue. And just raising taxes on the rich is not going to get you very far.
It's interesting, too, Dan, because I'll tell you what, I hate taxes. My property taxes have gone up, even as my value of my house has gone down. Sales tax, everything has gone up. But here's the dirty secret that no politician either A, seems to know, or B, has the guts to say, which is since 1980, the median income federal income tax rate has dropped by 50%. We paid over 10.5% in 1980. Now with deductions, et cetera, we're at about 4.5%. The middle class is not, they haven't been taxed to death with federal income taxes. They may be getting whacked with other stuff, but you agree it's not federal income tax rates. Most families making under 100 grand a year that own a home and have 2 kids pay zilch after deductions.
Well, this is the famous 47% number that Mitt Romney got in trouble for. Almost 50% of Americans don't pay federal income tax right now, but I don't think the answer is to sort of drag them into the swamp with the upper income people who are getting punished. Here's one other thing for your viewers. Every budget deal that we've had since 1980, where we had grand bargains with taxes on the table, the deficit went up, Congress spent money. The only budget deal that produced a budget surplus was the one in 1997, where we didn't raise taxes, we actually cut taxes. This is fundamentally a fight about the size of government. There's no way, if government keeps growing faster than the private sector, there's no way tax increases will ever keep up with it. It'll be like a dog chasing its tail. You don't cure alcoholics by giving them keys to a liquor store. We're not going to get Congress to control spending or the president to control spending if we put more revenue on the table. That just encourages the bad behavior.
Listen, I do agree. I try to take the other side. I do agree with you. Actually, I agree with a little bit about both of you said, and that makes a good discussion. David and Dan, have a great day. Thanks very much.